Can you please call the roll?
President Furman,
Present.
Vice President Curry,
Here.
Alder Bennett, Alder Conklin,
Present.
Alder Figueroa Cole,
Here.
Alder Foster,
Present.
Alder Heck,
Here.
and Alder Abbas is excused. You have quorum.
Great, thank you. Thank you. We do not have any registered people registered, so we're gonna skip the tech info. But I appreciate you being ready. Thank you. And we'll go right into approval of minutes. So can I get a motion?
Move to approve the last, I was going to say date, meeting minutes for the last CCEC.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you both. Any questions, comments, corrections, etc. with the minutes? Not seeing any, I'm going to assume approval by unanimous consent, and we'll move on to, as I said, there's no public comment. Does anybody have any disclosures or recusals? All right, not seeing any, we will jump into our items for consideration. The first one is a referral from the council, legislative item 74750, amending section 3.011 of the Madison General Ordinances to change alder term and elections. Alder Paulson will not be able to be with us this evening, unfortunately, due to a personal issue. But did feel like we probably have enough information to be able to talk about this tonight. This is doing staggered terms just and keeping it at 2 years since the 3 years was not able to get a sufficient amount of votes. Obviously, this question would still go out as a referendum. I think the biggest question for us would be, are we okay with the groups that the districts are put in, and are we okay with the plan on how we get there? And so I will actually open that legislation. I mean, but I don't know. Actually, let's see. Yeah, I mean, he's doing even number districts and odd number in odd number years. So thoughts, questions, comments? Questions for Attorney Haas? Alder Foster, go ahead.
Well, I guess I am supportive of it. I think it's better than not doing it, and I don't have any issues with how we get there. So I guess I would be in favor.
Vice President Curry.
So I'm really bad with math. Starting in 2025, so does that mean like districts 1, 3, 7, 9? Okay, I see some head nods. Yeah, I am in support as well.
Thank you. I mean, I think one of the things that we talked about a lot with the 3-year was whether or not we wanted there to be 1-year terms. That is this. The transition to this would have 1-year terms. Obviously, the alternative would be to do 3-year terms for a temporary period until we got into the staggering. I don't know if people want to leave it as proposed by Alder Paulson or want to make any changes to that. All right, Alder Conklin.
I'm sorry. I guess my question or concern is that we want to stagger them, but I'm a little confused. That's all. I'm just confused. So we're sticking with the 2-year terms, but like JL said, so if we get elected in 2023, then only the odd number years are going to run for election in 2025?
No, everybody would run for re-election in 2025, but the even numbered districts in 2025 would run for 1-year terms. The odds would run for 2-year terms. And then in 2026, the even would run for 2. And then in 2027, the odd would run for 2. And we would get into a schedule.
So every year, basically, there's going to be an election.
Correct, and it would be half the council up every year.
Okay.
We have to have that weird 2025. So 2023, people will still continue to run, and again, this is if the voters elect to do this. But 2023 normal, and then 2025 is where it gets weird, just for a short period of time. Alder Heck.
Thanks. I'm looking at the distribution of districts, if even are in even years and odd are in odd years. And from what I see, couple areas of the city would have a concentration of elections. That would be downtown-ish, which is 2, 4, 6, 8. And then on the sort of near west side, there's a cluster of odd districts. President Furman, you're shaking your head.
I'm shaking my head, saying that's problematic. Sorry, I agree with you. You're absolutely right, Alder.
Okay.
I'm agreeing with you.
I thought maybe I had that wrong, but Alder Foster originally proposed something that was even geographic based, clumps of geographies being elected at the same time. And I don't know as if it's problematic, but I just kind of wanted to point it out that those 2 areas have the most coincidental elections. I suppose in terms of turnover, that could be problematic if all the near west side alders were to turn over all at once, but that doesn't seem all that likely. But I'll let President Furman and others comment on that.
Yeah, I don't know if we would come up with the new numbers now, but I think I actually, even odd makes it very easily written in the ordinance, and makes it much less complicated than having to say, here are the districts. And so I assume that was probably the thinking. Let's just go with something easy. But I do think it would probably be problematic to have turnover in, a bunch of very close. I mean, as you said, even downtown. I mean, could you imagine losing, 2, 4, and 6 and 8 at the same time? I mean, that's a core group of people that are dealing with very unique city issues, and not being able to turn to a colleague that's been there for at least a year and say, hey, how did you do this previously? I think is pretty problematic. Alder Foster.
I mean, mostly just wanted to jump in to say, I mean, that's the case now and has been forever, right? I mean, for the whole city, you could lose all of them. So I guess I honestly just don't, and I guess I never felt concerned about that part of it. I feel like the reason I suggested grouping it by region was actually to give primarily the press some way to make sense of it. And I feel like the even and odds kind of does that, at least, because if barring that, it's going to be something that just seems very random, that nobody's going to memorize it, kind of thing. And so then it makes it feel more confusing, I guess. So I think I am supportive of it, and I'm not worried about the geographic co-location of elections. I mean, that happens with the council every 2 years across the whole city, and it hasn't created some weird things where everybody from the downtown all turn over at the same time. So I guess I'm okay rolling with it the way it is.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Anybody have any other thoughts, suggestions? Alder Heck.
I even though I'm the one that brought it up, I do generally agree with Alder Foster that it's not that big of a deal. And honestly, your average resident doesn't even know their alder district number. They just might know who their alder is. And I think that the even odd thing, it actually will help perhaps a little bit with that. It'll make it easier for the press and those who are paying attention, maybe even alders, to to understand. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, and it is unlikely that all of those will turn over at exactly the same time. Certainly possible, but as it is now. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Any other thoughts? Can I get a motion? Go ahead, Alder Foster.
I would recommend approval.
Can I get a second? Second by Alder Heck. We've had discussion, but if anybody wants any additional discussion, you're welcome to it. Unless I see otherwise, I'm going to assume recommend approval by unanimous consent. All right. Moving on to our next item, 74818, report of the CCEC subcommittee to establish a common council code of conduct. I am going to turn it over to Vice President Curry to let us know where the committee is.
Thanks, President Furman. So hopefully everyone has had a chance, or you can quickly glance in the Legistar, the draft that has been proposed. So since starting meeting, I think at the end of October, I can't remember, we've had a couple meetings, but this is a third draft of language that we came up with that we thought could be short and sweet, but also provided some context and links to further expand upon more complicated things, whether that's navigating I forget what the database that the ordinance is in, providing some definitions around what protected classes are. And members of the subcommittee have approved this current draft that's before us, but wanted to bring not just the draft, but a question to CCEC for advice about implementation. First and foremost, thinking about the first anti-discrimination and harassment document was proposed as a resolution, and there's been conversation within the committee or just conversation period of extending the expectations not just to elected officials, but to appointed city officials. And so kind of whether we wanted to go the route of introducing this as a resolution, or whether we wanted this to be a longer term, my words are not here tonight, more of a commitment by being introduced as ordinance or changed in ordinance. So a couple questions, and Alder Tischler is also here from the subcommittee, so please jump in if I forget anything. Whether or not to take the draft to ordinance and have it apply. And if that's the case, we haven't, at least in the subcommittee, engaged with city employees that this would affect. So thinking about the department heads that the council approves their contracts, I believe. So I made a mistake in the council meeting by saying, was it contracted? I forget. Anyways, so taking it to ordinance or having it in as a resolution, and then kind of the next steps following forward to implementation. Attorney Haas brought to our attention something that could be a challenge is who would be responsible for ensuring that everyone this applies to would sign off an acknowledgement and would be in compliance. And currently, I think a comparison was made to the statement of economic interest that the clerk's office ensures. Board commissions, committee members, elected officials, all complete that on an annual basis. And then third, I think moving on, after we figure out what to do with the draft, there is definitely a desire to not just provide some guidance, but also to have some tools and resources. So another update after that would be the four organizations that we were looking into providing some resources to deal with things such as conflict management, effective or trauma-informed communications, and keeping equity and inclusion at the forefront of all. That would, I can't talk tonight. Alder Tischler, did I forget anything?
Let's see. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Remote tonight. Church rehearsal. No, I think you covered everything. I think one of the goals we talked about was to also have something in place by April. So when we have a new cohort of alders coming in, that they could be ready and up and running at that point.
All right, I'll stop there before I confuse anybody else with mumbling, but
Yeah, just to clarify, department heads are covered by APM 3.5. So whatever we do here, we can still decide if we wanted to, if we codify this, make it apply to whoever we want via ordinance. I think it really comes down to the big thing that I heard was the implementation. How do we implement this? Especially as it gets bigger. Questions, thoughts on next steps? I think Vice President Curry and the group are looking for some guidance from us. Vice President Curry, do you want to maybe give? I'll let Alder Foster speak, but maybe if there are very specific asks that you have of this group, maybe summarize that. Grant, Alder Foster, do you want to hear that first, or do you want to speak first? And so, Vice President Curry, do you think you can quickly summarize what the big asks are, not just where we are, but I think you did. So I apologize for putting you on the spot again. Then
no, it's fine. I mumbled my way through it. So the first big ask is whether or not we should bring this back to council and introduce to adopt as a resolution, or for it to be created an ordinance. The second one would be advice or guidance on steps the subcommittee should take to engage with those who it would affect, not just the council, obviously. Yeah, those are the big two asks right now.
So Vice President Curry, do you think it's an open question on whether or not it would apply to BCC, or do you think that the committee feels like it should apply to BCC, but it's unclear about implementation? Or would you like better guidance here?
You said a word and I already forgot it because I was going to ask for clarification.
No, yeah. So did the committee decide that this should apply to BCCs, or is that a question that you're asking us?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. To my perspective, I believe the subcommittee did think that it should apply to BCCs.
But then the question is then how to implement it. You'd like some advice from us on
yes.
Implementation and thoughts, et cetera.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Alder Foster, go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks for the work of the group. I think it looks good. Could somebody, I don't know if this is Attorney Haas, speak to, is it currently an ordinance, the requirement around the statement of interest form? I believe.
Yeah, yes, it is.
And that link, is it just saying that every year, like this should be done? Does it go into detail in terms of what all needs to be asked on there, or is it just that form needs to be completed every year?
Yeah, I mean, that ordinance does specify what has to be reported on the statement of economic interest. Of course, the form is not in the ordinance, but it describes what has to be disclosed. I think if this were to be adopted by ordinance, my feeling would be it could be much shorter to say that officials have to execute this by a certain date. But it could refer to a form. The form doesn't have to be, or all of this language doesn't have to be in the ordinance. It could be we could refer to the code of conduct as adopted by the council or by CCEC and leave it at that.
Well, so I think that's where my mind goes is I kind of like how this has evolved a little bit. I think it would be useful. I think something kind of, short, sort of high level, but explaining remedies and possible consequences. I think all that makes sense for alders, and I think probably especially for BCC members also. I think it's a really good tool to have, so that if there are issues with members, I mean, even the mayor's office has this to rely on as well, and this could be used as cause for removal. So I think I'm sort of more excited, I guess, about adopting something that looks like this. And I think to me, it would make sense to maybe have it briefly be referenced in ordinance, in the BCC, section or something, or wherever we got the economic interest one, I guess. But then just leave it as a sort of the, code of conduct policy. And I think that we should I think we should give CCC the ability and the responsibility to just review it, maybe even on an annual basis, or somehow give them the authority to sort of update that form or the document over time, but codify that it should be reviewed and signed off, whatever you call that, where you say, yes, I attest that I read this and I agree to it or something. Because my read of it is it doesn't really, it's not like a new contract or something that we need to get your signature so that we can apply this to you, because the consequences theoretically already exist, right? This doesn't really create like new pathways for consequence or something. So I feel like it's good in that vein of make sure people are aware of it, make sure it's something that folks can lean on if there are issues, and codify that in ordinance, but not the specific language, and let that be modified over time.
Go ahead, Vice President Curry.
Thank you, and thank you, Alder Foster. Question then, I need to, oh my God, why can I not say words tonight? Clear up. I made a mistake in what I was saying about guidance on then reaching out to those who had impacts. I think mostly it was, we had a conversation about the clerk's office, and kind of little feedback, not directly, was that they felt it'd be burdensome. The economic statements already kind of are. Is there any suggestion or advice you'd have about engaging them to get a viewpoint regarding implementation of this? And I see Attorney Haas has his hand raised too.
Vice President Curry, it's cold out. It's understandable that you have not acclimated to that cold yet. Attorney Haas, go ahead.
Thanks. Just to follow up on that, I mean, that was one of the concerns I think the staff raised. And I mean, this policy does not even specify who is to implement it. If it's the council office, if it's the clerk's office, it just says it's to be done. And to Alder Foster's point, I mean, it doesn't state any consequences, at least in the statement of economic interest ordinance. It says if it's not filled out, ultimately BCC members can be removed from their positions. So, one of the questions I think I had is there a consequence, and who's going to implement this? I mean, another option might be to require BCCs at their first meeting in April or May or whatever to have this on their agenda and everybody sign it at the meeting, so we don't have staff trying to track down hundreds and hundreds of people who don't sign it, like we have to do now with the statement of economic interest. That was my big concern is right now it just says this shall happen. It doesn't say who is responsible for implementing it.
Alder Foster, go ahead.
Thanks, President Furman. Two thoughts. One, I actually think there may not be a lot of value in the annual sign off of this. I think it actually probably makes sense to be for a new member. And I don't know, somebody could check with the mayor's office around what happens for new members right now, but that actually seems more appropriate. And unless it changes, I don't think you need to, I think the statement of economic interest, acknowledges that changes can happen. You could become a board member or have some economic state that changes over time, but I don't actually think there's really maybe value in requiring somebody to sign off on this every year. So that might help just in terms of the amount of work. And then in terms of the who, I don't know if Chief of Staff, if you've been kind of brought into thinking on this, but it seems like a good thing for that BCC admin team kind of in collaboration with the clerk's office and, figure out kind of what the different options are. And like I said, maybe the mayor's office, if it's more of an onboarding or kind of initial BCC member thing. So I don't know if that helps, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Alder Foster. I think what I'm hearing too from Attorney Haas is, I don't think anybody knows what the right answer is as far as here's the person who should be in charge. But I think we probably should be prescriptive about that. I agree that this could be, part of the sign-in process. Frankly, you don't start on a committee unless you filled this out, but it also probably ignores the fact that we have 600-700 members already now that are part of the system that we're going to have to, rightfully so, have them sign off on this. And so then who's going to do that? And then the enforcement question is a good point. I think when it comes to BCCs, it's one thing, and when it comes to alders, for me, it's another thing. I mean, it's a different, what is that? That's always been the big question mark with how you enforce a policy like this, especially when it's not a binary thing necessarily. So I would like to see it be as prescriptive as possible, so it's not a struggle. But I don't know if we're going to give advice here or go tell the committee to go back and be more prescriptive and come back to us or what. Alder Foster.
Thanks. I guess I'm still thinking then further about the value of recording the acceptance of. So what my original excitement around this is, I think this is important to share in terms of expectations and clarify. Failure to do these things could mean, if you're a BCC member, that you lose your appointment. I don't think that is different than actually how it's going on today. I mean, if somebody were actually harassing or doing any other things, the mayor could remove their appointment for cause, without having this policy adopted and without, whether or not the person in question, if we have on file that they signed acceptance, or you know what I mean. So it's not like it's a contract in any way or really introducing something, I don't think, far beyond what people should hopefully are coming with as members. So I guess I'm even questioning the need. I think maybe the focus should be more on making sure that it is shared with new members, that we think of a plan to disseminate out to current members. I'm not maybe as convinced anymore that we need to manage the logistics of recording their receipt of, signature of, and I'm not sure that would change anything. And maybe that also helps simplify. We don't really need an enforcement mechanism then, because we're really just clarifying expectations and letting people know if you don't act right, there could be consequences that are already in place.
I think that I find that helpful. Thank you, Alder Foster. Alder Heck.
Thanks. Yeah, that was helpful. I know this probably falls under the question of who's going to implement. I mean, we've so far talked about who's going to make sure this policy is read and distributed and managed. And I don't know as if we've really touched on some of the other implementation items. And I think maybe that's on purpose, but I just want to make sure I understand the subcommittee's motivation, because these questions will get asked. For instance, at the bottom of the first page, about 6 or 8 lines up, it says, when bad things happen, effort shall be taken to notify the individuals of the substance of the issue so they can resolve it. And then, almost at the end, the city shall offer trainings and other supports. And I can imagine Alder saying, well, who is that? Who's going to do that? And that's, maybe you don't want to go there yet. That's part of figuring out the implementation, but I feel like those questions will be asked immediately. And so I don't know if the subcommittee has discussed some of those things, or is that kind of a separate implementation effort that still needs to happen?
Thank you, Alder Hack. Vice President Curry, do you want to address that at all?
I think the only piece that I kind of foreshadowed but didn't share a lot of information of was what those trainings or like what organizations we were looking towards doing that with. But the other question was regarding kind of the consequence for, where is that? I was trying to find the line when I heard my name.
Oh, it's in the paragraph that starts with bullying, harassment, and discrimination at the bottom of the first page. In the second sentence, bad things happen, so effort shall be taken. And I think some, alders are going to say, who's taking that effort? What is that effort going to be? And I think to the past, and that's the kind of stuff that came up. And it may be that we don't even necessarily have to have that totally figured out, but I just kind of wondered if we need to figure any of that out ahead of time.
No, yes. What happens, after something? I think an example of, was it the sustainable Madison incident that kind of hit the media, was brought up and discussed at a subcommittee meeting, or I think maybe at CCEC, and kind of that same issue being drawn out. Like, does the public know the process if there was to file a complaint, for instance? Alder Foster just earlier tonight said that the mayor could choose to revoke someone's appointment to a BCC, but in obviously my little almost 2 years, I have not seen that happen before. So those are all things that I think all helpful and things that iron out before bringing back to the council so that we can have some concrete answers around that. So far, the only recommendation or thought to kind of hinge on something that's existing was going through the clerk's office, similar to how the statement of economic interest is required. But I had a couple of thoughts, but I like the thought about not signing off on it annually to not create more of a burden for, folks that probably won't be us. And also, with the reviewing, like Alder Foster said, he'd like to see CCEC have the ability to review and revise in the future. But how would this be reviewed or reiterated, within those BCCs as people serve? Because can people serve unlimited terms on BCCs? No. I saw no, and I saw somebody like, eh.
I don't know. I don't know. Is it codified at 10 years, or is that just practice?
I thought the only limitation was to be a chair.
Alder Heck, since you still have your hand up, if you want to say something, go ahead. It sounds like Alder Foster though has a comment as well.
Let's let Alder Foster speak, definitely.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Down your hand. Go ahead.
I think the ordinance limits, I think it's 12 years that the council can sort of overrule that, but that's the limit that's set in ordinance. I think it's 12, but it's definitely set in there somewhere.
Alder Heck, did you have something else?
Yeah, I'm still a little bit uneasy about not having more implementation ideas about what happens when things go bad. And the policy says some good things, but it doesn't really give any concrete details. And I wonder if those questions need to be thought about a little bit. Who is going to determine that something bad happened? And then what happens? And what's that process going to be? And I know we talked about some of that in the past when we were talking about other earlier versions of this. But I feel like those questions will come up about, well, who determines something bad happened? The victim, but then who do they talk to? Are we going to utilize human resources, or how does that play out?
And I think that ends up being a lot more complicated too when you include the BCCs, because there's probably one thing you could do with the council, and then it's a whole other world with the BCCs. Alder Foster.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I mean, in terms of implementation, I think it could either be sort of chief of staff as lead of that BCC admin team, potentially a role for the clerk's office, depending on if trying to piggyback on things, or if the council felt like that was an appropriate, resource to tap into, or maybe mayor's office with the BCC sort of functions. So I guess I would be interested maybe letting our chief of staff have some time to kind of work on identifying some of those implementation points and come back at a later date, either, to that subcommittee or to us here with, here's some different possibilities for those things. And then that way too, I don't think we have to get too into the weeds on it, but just at least where that first line of accountability is. And then I think we could write that into an adopting resolution that here's the policy and here's who we're empowering to implement that policy. And I think so if we could at least know, does it go outside of the council office staff? Do we need to, in that adopting resolution, call out support from mayor's office or clerk's office or something like that? But so maybe that could be an ask over the next month or two or whatever to kind of work through some of that. And I agree that we should be, if there are even a budget amendment or anything that's needed to actually help support or implement some of these things, it'd be good to know that at the time that we're considering adoption.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa, call, go ahead.
I don't recall which one of the transportation committees had intended to run a pilot for kind of this similar discussion. Christy Kumar was running that particular situation. Maybe we can just connect with her and see if we can get additional feedback on the question that Patrick was asking about having something in place to, what actions can be taken or should be taken. That was during the summer, and I had them follow up since, but I think that'd be a good resource too to see how that is going. Grant or Berman, I don't know I don't recall which transportation meeting that was. I want to say it's the planning one, but not sure. No, that wasn't it. I know that I watched the meeting and they were discussing this kind of behavior and how to make the committees more cohesive and how to deal with conflict and all that stuff. So they wanted that particular committee to serve as a pilot because they already kind of were in the path of, I remember Bill was in that meeting too. I was watching, he was in the meeting too, where they were discussing the cross guards. So I don't know which of the two, but for sure it was Christy. So I would suggest, I can follow up myself, but I if Jael wants to follow up with her and see what she has. We may not have to reinvent the wheel. That's what I'm saying. Maybe they got something already in place that we can copy.
I'm going to jump the queue and just say it was Transportation Commission. Okay, sorry.
Gracias.
Karen, go ahead.
Just a couple quick notes, and I'll talk about this in my update, but I'm meeting with the admin services team next week, so good timing. I can have a conversation with them about this issue. I wanted to also remind everyone that we have money in the budget for Alder training. So at least the Alder section of this question, Alder training and Alder conflict resolution. So that passed, that was in the executive budget and came through. So I think we're in a good place in 2023 to put out some requests for proposals for both of those things. And I'm working with Vice President Curry on getting that ball rolling now that we know that that's the direction that we went in the budget. So the larger question would be the rolling out to the BCCs. You know, that's when you ask about a budget amendment, it's so on expanding that offering. You know, if that's the direction we want to go, obviously that's an expense, but we could pilot with the alders, and you know, I'm okay with however you'd like to go ahead. I just wanted to mention that because I know there was some confusion about whether or not there was money and what kind of money was in the 2023 budget for training and conflict resolution. So thank you.
Thank you. Alder Figueroa Cole, do you still have your hand up because you want to speak, or you just put it down?
I'm just hungry, so.
All right. Well, thanks for letting us know. All right. So it sounds like one of the big clarification pieces we got is it seems like getting people to sign it is probably unnecessary, and that was definitely a fearful administrative burden with how many members we have. But I'm not hearing a ton of, hey, we're answering all your questions, Vice President Curry. How do you feel like you're getting clear direction from us on next steps? Would you like to ask either the same question or more clarifying questions so you can better understand what's expected of the committee going forward?
Yep. So maybe just running back what I heard and clarify. So the question of who would be responsible for enforcing this or compliance. I think I heard several city offices mentioned: the clerk's office, mayor's office, council office, Department of Civil Rights, HR. Did I miss any in there? And I wanted to ask too, Karen, I'm not familiar with the BCC admin team. Like, who is comprised in that group?
So it works out well because, in fact, those organizations are all represented in that group. So, for example, I'm just going to look here at the quick list here of folks I'm meeting with next week. Mayor's office, clerk's office, HR, attorney's office, finance, mayor, DCR, IT, and performance excellence. We added, so.
Okay. And so I don't think I'm clear on the feedback of how to determine who holds that, but I saw Alder Foster shake his head really strongly when Karen mentioned piloting through the council office. So maybe some clarity on like what that would look like, or just focusing on the, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's probably first is getting clarity on what passing this means. So I think, to me, if we're, and maybe another close read would be helpful, but if we're not actually creating any new requirements or rules that require new enforcement or anything like that, which that's not what I took out of it. If it's a sort of a statement of position and maybe aspirational, but or expectational, I guess, then it's really about sort of disseminating it, maybe coming up with a process to review it kind of on an annual basis. Maybe, we should have we could say at your annual meetings, you need to review with everybody this. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think getting clear about what the it is before needing to engage a whole bunch of different departments, because if if it's really just about us being clear that we have a code of conduct policy and the ask is just to share it with members, then the other stuff that is interesting is the trainings that are available, conflict mediation, some other things that it's like we're wanting to be able to provide. And I don't think we have to have all of those 100% in place for all appointed and elected officials on the day that we pass this, right? We can still pass it and say this is our statement of values around it. And here's consequences that are already in place for people that fail to do it. And we might suggest using resources that we don't have available yet. And then I do think it would be worthwhile to focus where we already have the money and we have a smaller group of folks that focus on the alders, and with in mind of being able to export that or create a version of that could be available for or implemented out to BCC members. And if there's a recommendation for that, even let the mayor know as they're preparing next year's budget and get it in there for the 24 budget. So yeah, I don't think we have to have all of the answers necessarily resolved or all of the funding in place or all of the programming in place the day that we pass this, if it's primarily a statement of our values and kind of broad expectations.
Thank you, Alder. Vice President Curry, was that hopeful?
I'm gonna let Attorney House go first.
All right, Attorney House, go.
Thanks. I just have a question, I guess, about the process. Since the subcommittee is meeting next week, are you looking at having a resolution prepared? Do you want more homework to be done first, or it sounds like now we're not talking about an ordinance if we're not talking about an enforcement of people being removed?
Is that a question for me?
I think Alder Foster, since he put up his hand, why don't we let him take a shot at this before?
Attorney House, could in terms of the enforcement, I mean, I sort of asserted earlier that I don't think this necessarily creates a different opportunity to, take somebody out of an appointed position. I think this clarifies or just restates the process for, if it's an alder. So as in your read, does it create any new kind of mechanism or something that we have to account for?
No, I think that's an accurate way to look at it. Even if we didn't have this policy, if there was extreme behavior, then the person could be removed for cause. So I think that's a good point. It certainly would address the administrative part of it. So my opinion is that that's maybe a good solution.
I mean, so I guess originally I was thinking, oh, yeah, do it ordinance, get it in there. But as we've sort of the conversations evolved, what I'm hearing is we could do this almost primarily administratively in terms of, I think we could then pass a resolution for the language of the policy, make sure that the full Common Council supports everything that's in there. But then in that case, if there's not some ongoing requirements or anything like that, then I don't think it really needs to be an ordinance, and I think we could just pass it with the resolution. In this moment in time, we're adopting this policy, and with any direction around implementation, that maybe we get some guidance coming back from our chief of staff after they kind of look in and have some conversations with other departments and the BCC admin team.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Go ahead, Attorney House.
Well, so just, I guess, for Karen and my benefit, would the subcommittee looking to have a draft resolution next week, or for more work to be done before you consider a resolution?
Karen, if you want to comment, go ahead.
I'll throw another question into the mix to help me with logistics. There's also a resolution and policy in play from previously in the council queue, and so any suggestions on how to resolve this and that also, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I want to understand a little more about your thoughts on that as well. Thanks.
Alder Foster, go.
I think we set that to come back to CCC in like February or something. Isn't that the last action? So I guess my thought would be like, hopefully we can do what we kind of talked about ahead of that. And then I would just get ready and use whatever the new, whatever the recommended policy, and resolution language. And we could then have a substitute, for that. And it seems like that was the timing that we all talked about earlier, and I think felt comfortable with. So that gives, several months. And if everybody's ready and we want to do it ahead of that, we certainly could as well. And then I guess just, place the other one on file if we happen to beat it. But I don't think there's any real urgency ahead of that in my mind.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Vice President Curry, go ahead.
I could appreciate clarification. I kind of wrote down some steps. I think one of the primary goals of the subcommittee was to make it as short as possible and as easy to read as possible, acknowledging that ordinance is not, and most I don't go there. As an alder, it thoroughly confuses me. So would the suggestion be adding on to the draft policy kind of context on what the passage of this means, expectations around that, and then referencing consequence that is already mentioned in ordinance, or that be kind of like a memo that accommodates the draft that's presented to council?
Alder Foster, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the document as a policy could stand as is, and then in the resolution could have additional clauses in it, and there could be any language in the whereas clauses, and then the be it resolved is where you could say we adopt the policy, and any other sort of direction around implementation, et cetera. So that's what I think can get worked out over the next month or two or whatever it takes. And then there could also be I think drafters analysis are usually more for ordinances, but I think you can basically get all of the language and content that you'd want in the body of the resolution that adopts the policy draft, the final draft that you'll kind of come back with.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Karen, go ahead.
While we're working on getting clarification, thank you all for your patience. I wanted to make sure too. So what I'm imagining is we come up with these additional clauses. Attorney Haas and I, for example, do some drafting. And because we have this other legislator number in file, we consult with the sponsor of the original and see if they're amenable to taking on the additional clauses as a sub. And if they're not, then it would become an alternate, I think is what I'm hearing. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. And so then what we can, we have a short turnaround between now and Tuesday, but we can try to get at least some clauses drafted and for discuss, so that we'll have something just for discussion on Tuesday. Tuesday subcommittee meeting. Yeah, I saw a little confusion. Tuesday subcommittee meeting at 4:30, just so that they can do some of that. They can look at that. That might be. Does that sound like what you all would like?
It's not clear to me that you guys actually need a subcommittee meeting on Tuesday. I think my suggestion, I think we've heard a bunch of good feedback today. I think there's some process things that still need to be figured out. And there's some people that, which is fine. And I actually put myself in that category that actually don't have strong opinions about the process. And there's some people that do have strong opinions about the process. So my suggestion would be for Vice President Curry to work with Alder Foster and Karen on finishing up these last steps and figure out the best path. I'm not hearing, strong concern. I think we have heard, concerns and comments that will be helpful to move it forward. Does anybody have any strong objection with kind of that advice from CCEC, which is, take the discussion as advice, and Alder Foster and Vice President Curry can work on next steps, and including, when it's most appropriate to loop back in the committee, because I do think the committee should meet one more time, but I think having them meet on Tuesday is probably way too quick. And based on how much time we have, it's just not necessary to rush that. Anybody have any objection with us, kind of leaving it there? Fantastic. I appreciate the subcommittee's work. This is kind of a tricky thing, and there's still some tricky things to figure out, but I think we're getting closer to wrapping it up. Attorney Haas, go ahead.
Thanks. Before we move on, I just wanted to, I had a chance to acknowledge that I was wrong about, as Alder Foster pointed out, about the term limits for BCC members. That is in Chapter 33. It is 12 years, and I do like to acknowledge every time I've made mistakes. So I wanted to get that on the record.
You're not allowed to send Alder Foster any sort of trophy or something, because that would be an ethics violation. So you're just going to have to take those kind words, Alder Foster. All right. Let me go ahead and open back up the agenda, and we'll move on to. So there's no action that we're taking on that this evening. I think we have at least somewhat of a plan going forward, and appreciate everybody working on that, and look forward to hearing more about that in the near future. So the next item I'm pretty excited about is Alder onboarding and ongoing training, agenda item 72111. There's been a bunch of work on clarifying the presentation that was given to, I believe, based on the date and Legistar, I'm going to guess on at our meeting on August 31st, we did an update kind of talking about the structure of what onboarding could look like. And there's been some discussion with the mayor's management team. We presented that to them, and Karen's been working with some city departments. And I think we have a kind of a template that we wanted to run by this evening, which was attached to the Legistar item. Hopefully people have had an opportunity to look at it, but we certainly can open it and talk about it tonight and see if people are comfortable with this guide, and get it to a place that hopefully very soon we can start distributing, because before we know it, April is going to be here, and we certainly are asking the agencies to spend a lot of time to make sure that new alders will be able to hit the ground running. So Karen, do you want to pull up that guide, and we could and talk through kind of the discussions you've had on it, and let CCEC know what next steps you're looking for?
All right, so you should be able to have it up there on there. So what we're doing, I'm working with Kara Kratowitz from Performance Excellence and Barney Gallagher from both of them are from organizational development, to take the instructions and information that President Furman and Alder Figueroa Cole put together in the PowerPoint, and translate that into instructions for agencies to follow to create short videos. So this is basically the guide for them in terms of understanding categories and additional resources and topics, and then we're working to create detailed instructions for how for agencies to do this, where to submit their completed materials, and then we're working with IT on then getting those materials made available on our website. So we're sort of working through this process and hoping to be able to push this out in the very near future to give the agency some time, because it does have some components to it that they'll have to think through. So what you see here is there are major categories of types of videos. And of course, these videos are, as you know, designed to be bite-sized. And I guess I don't need to read through any of this, but you can take a look and see how
I
it's set up.
actually probably think it's helpful to kind of go over the big concepts. We
great.
don't need to go into like the attachments and resource links necessarily, but
Okay.
I just think reminding people that, kind of this is the structure and getting, I'm okay with even real-time feedback. So why don't we even just start with introductions?
Perfect.
So, first video being, one of the things I think I probably want to point out is that the idea of short video seems to there are certain agencies or certain people that this was discussed with where the idea of short videos ended up being a little bit more confusing than it was supposed to be. I think the thing that we're trying to really stress is 3-hour marathons learning about a department is unhelpful for all parties involved. Nobody is getting anything out of that, and having shorter videos that are more bite-sized will probably be much more helpful. And so, as we're reviewing this as a group, I'm seeing like the introduction. I'm not sure people can cover all of that stuff in 5 minutes. So maybe we do want to up that, but do people have thoughts on let's very, very specifically look at the introduction. If the agency is doing this only when key agency staff changes, but they will put together an introduction video that will talk about the agency heads, the mission, the structure, examples of the main agency services, and introducing key staff. Does 5 minutes make sense to people? Are there other things that people would like to see in that introduction? Are there any other notes that we should add, or that looks about right? Silence is acceptance in this particular exercise, just so everybody knows. Alder Heck.
I have a question. What is an agency?
Fancy term for department.
So
so that could be our first edit is we'd like them to be called departments. No?
I'll throw in some more fun nuance.
Right.
Because we have departments and divisions. That's my folk theory for why this city has taken upon itself to use the term agency. Because I first got here and I was so confused. What is an agency? So that's my folk theory on why we have the word agency, is because it encompasses departments and divisions.
And that's a lot of, if they're 5-minute videos, that's in my opinion, an awful lot. I mean, whoosh, how many are there if it's divisions? Approximately, are there? I mean, is there? What about like parking enforcement, which is now under TE? Is that a division? That's a lot of people. Forestry within streets.
So Alder. So I mean, I guess my reaction to that, Alder Heck, would be, we can't ignore things that exist just because it's a lot, and so the idea that it's a lot of agencies, and so maybe we don't want to have as an alder, you may not need to know about forestry anytime soon, but when you need to know, wouldn't it be nice if there was a bunch of a content guide on there was content on that agency, but I think also, though, part of that, the other part I just want to say, wouldn't it be helpful? It'd probably be helpful for us to have a list of who the agencies are that we're asking this from. So that's something that we can certainly talk about again as a group, or maybe talk frankly via email, because I want to get people going on this. I don't remember when our next thing is, but I think the thought is we could probably go look at who did orientations previously, and honestly, I'm not sure we actually did a great job with that. I don't recall forestry doing their own thing. Obviously they've changed, so they may not be the best example, but just because I don't need to know about something now doesn't mean I won't need to know about something in the future as an alder, and it'd be great if that information was available. So
that's a great point. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to, and I think it's worth remembering, we're trying to make this not a, on Thursday night you're going to watch all these videos on the parking utility. It's, here are the things you need to know, and you can take this at your own pace. They're there. So hopefully that makes it less overwhelming. But the city's pretty overwhelming.
So this first introductory video, in my mind, it would be hard to squeeze all of those things into 5 minutes, but certainly they should be 10 minutes max. And those making the videos should understand that perhaps this is the only one that for that purpose that you'll be making for 5 years. I mean, it's not something you're going to have to do over and over again.
Yeah, and I actually think based on you talking about being overwhelmed with how many, this is probably one of those that you definitely want to have the slides available. And so like I, as an alder, may want to go, oh, their mission is this. I don't need to know about this. I'll watch this video at another point, or, especially seeing like the examples of the main agency services. So I think, somebody, I like the idea of personally, I like the idea of the 10-minute max, and I probably think having all the content available visually and not having to watch the full video, so I know, okay, I'm that's not something I'm worried about right now. I'll watch it another time. Would probably be helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Alder Foster, go ahead.
Thanks. I was going to suggest it probably would be good at this juncture to get a list of who we're considering agencies for the purpose of this exercise and the kind of the groupings of them, and maybe reflecting on how it was done live in the past as a starting point. But I think that is actually a really interesting question, and is one grouping, or one, it should, so traffic enforcement isn't its own agency. I wouldn't say it's like a service line within the parking utility, which is an agency or a division of the Department of Transportation. So is the DOT the bucket, and is the introduction going to cover, hey, here's traffic engineering, here's metro, and here's parking utility, or each one of those going to have their own and be introduced as their own? And so I think for me, the real value of this is starting to orient new alders towards the organizational structure of the city. And so it actually, I think to me, makes more sense to do, here's the Department of Transportation. Hi, I'm Tom Lynch. Here, I'm going to turn it over. Hey, I'm Yang Tao. This is what traffic engineering covers. And really that highest level of here's the service lines and here's the things that we cover, and get a hold of us with any questions you have. And so I think the time limits also should be, we shouldn't give a small agency 5 minutes, maybe even, but maybe a different one needs 10 if it's got, if it's a very large department with the city.
Yeah, and so I think you're very focused on the agencies being much bigger entities as opposed to having each individual do small, and that orients people to how they're working together, or how things fall in the structure. Thank you, Alder Foster. Vice President Curry.
I have a question, and possibly the answer may lead me to have a comment, but knowing the orientation we went through almost 2 years ago was both voice, but also had PowerPoint slides, and then emails were sent to us even before our city email addresses were set up. Has there been any overlap with the folks that we would be asking to do this, to see like if they have things to recycle from last period, or because it's more condensed, do you want something brand new?
I don't think we've specifically told people that they can't recycle stuff, but I think we're probably trying to be more consistent about the formatting. And so if an agency has a presentation that already does parts of this, they can certainly reuse it. But I think we're trying to be a little bit more consistent across it and more bite-sized. I think if we probably went through the existing orientations, we'd be able to check a bunch of these boxes next to these things and prove that they probably did it. But I think I recall everybody kind of structured it a little bit differently. But content, everybody's going to have to recreate this one way or another. But this is the stuff they live and breathe. So I'm sure they'll borrow and create some new stuff, and we're giving them a lot of time, and there's a lot of benefit to having them put this together. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. It was the re-recording when key agency staff changes that kind of concerned me. I like the fact that it could be relevant, like Alder Heck said, for 5 years, but I know we've seen several retirements of department or agency heads, at least within this last 2 years. So just a comment kind of about concern and not necessarily needing to revise when staff changes, but I'm thinking we have a mayoral election this year. Depending on who's in that seat, focuses may change, and more so if systems or services change versus staff changing would be my suggestion, recommendation. And then looking over everything, it may just be semantics or words. I personally would appreciate some type of guidance, incorporation into like the Municode or whatever, the ordinance is there, and some of those like how to do the job for alders, because I feel like city staff do a really good job of reaching out or answering our questions about like specific situations, but I'd like more guidance in where I can find certain things, because that has been one of my biggest challenges, the amount of time it takes and then getting the wrong person or all of that. So I don't know if that's included in any of these. I couldn't decipher, but yeah, that's my comment.
Yeah, and I appreciate Vice President Curry that you pointing out getting the wrong person. I mean, I think all these videos are intended to be easy to redo. I think an introduction video hopefully doesn't take a department more than a few minutes to hey, I'm Matt Tucker now, I'm in charge of this department. But I think knowing as a new alder that Matt Tucker is now in charge of building inspection is key. And that's one of the best things that we have through experience is I know who the key person is in a particular department because I've been doing this job for a while, and I know who to reach out to and who helps me, et cetera. And so asking a department to re-record a 3-hour thing would be absolutely ridiculous, but asking them to record a max 10-minute video on, hey, reintroduce your personnel, hopefully is not too heavy of a lift, and is certainly, I think, pays dividends when that means the alder is now going to be able to refer to that or refer to that and know, this is the person I talked to in this department and why. Alder Figueroa Cole, you're making a lot of faces possibly at me. I don't know if you want to take a deep breath before you unmute yourself, but your call, go ahead.
He's asking, I'm sorry. Having a conversation on the side with Jesse, sorry about that. Okay, so regarding the agenda, the term agencies, I have to say, I mean, I want us to be consistent with the way the website is set up, because believe it or not, once you understand how to navigate the city website, it actually makes sense. So, for example, transportation, you go in there and then you can see all the different divisions and this and that, right? So to me, it's super important that we're consistent with that, because we will be even more lost if we don't kind of speak in the same language. So with Alder Curry, I mean, the other day I was looking for X person, and she gave me a name, and then after we realized that was the wrong name, I realized I already had talked to that person, but like the names don't stick so much to me because again, we don't use this person people all the time. So going back to I totally agree with that sentiment of having turnover and having to redo videos when people leave. I think perhaps having a organizational chart available for people and have these videos be again focused on the agency. So I don't care if Tom does the video or if Jan does the video, just like do the video about the role, not about I'm the head of this department type of thing. To me, that would make more sense than introducing people. Yes, it's nice to have them there, but once if Tom leaves or has lives or Jen, retires, we don't need to redo the video just because they retire. If we focus on what the agency does and what problems they're solving for us. That's how I visualize these things. For all I care, if we had the money, we could hire actors to do the video, as long as we focus on the agency's role. So that's the two things I have. Like,
I know, but in all seriousness, you don't actually think. I mean, like one of the things that we've tried to get better about is we have staff that show up at meetings and they don't introduce themselves. I mean, that used to happen all the time at council meetings. You'd have, I know Matt Tucker, but and I'm just going to keep picking on Matt Tucker tonight. Hopefully he doesn't watch these videos. But I know Matt Tucker, but if Matt Tucker isn't coming to the meeting and saying, hi, I'm Matt Tucker, and, here's my job, members of the public have no idea. Some elders that may never have dealt with him have no idea. So I actually think seeing a face and a name and having somebody hearing their voice, I think there's value in that. And I think, I don't think it's too hard to re-record.
I don't disagree with that, but I don't think they should be the focus of it. I think the focus should be what you're there for. So like again with Tom Lynch, there's so many different areas on his agency. For me to know that Metro is under his, that Metro is separate, that engineering street is separate, that whatever. To me, that's more important. When he's on vacation, I don't care who helps me. I just gonna go to, whatever. So, I don't want to get hung up on that. I'm just saying that for me personally, I just want to know what the agencies are and what problems they can solve for me. Again, traffic, speeding, the ordinances, for example, the ordinances over there from Matt Tucker's, they have like 2 ordinances that they use all the time. Can we just focus on those things?
So do you think it's problematic having Tom Lynch introduce himself and introduce key staff in this department?
No, I don't think it's problematic. I think it shouldn't be the focus of the video. Like, yeah, I just think.
I think you're probably not giving enough credit for all the other things that end up happening in the other videos. This is literally that. It's an introduction. Here are examples of the services. Here's who's in the department.
Yeah, whatever. Again, to me, introduce the agency is more important to me than the people. We're all going to have to figure out who they are. And I'm still to this day, I'm sure it exists, but I don't really have a organizational chart.
Okay.
Like I think maybe Karen shared that with me at one point, but it's really not you know what I mean? Or like we should definitely put some work into that.
Yeah,
those are my things.
Appreciate it.
It was good, but those are my 2 things. Again, naming convention, keep it straight and consistent, and focus on the issues. But whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen, go ahead. You're muted.
I was trying to find while I'm sharing screen. Yeah, I wanted to affirm a couple of things that I heard, because I'm feeling a bit of urgency, and maybe this is misplaced, and you can tell me if you think it's misplaced. I'm feeling a bit of urgency to get this out in December to the agencies, because I do want to let them have time to process and plan and do. So I am feeling a bit like I'd like to get this out in December. I think that my head was at where Alder Figueroa Cole's head is at in terms of the website. The agency drop downs on the website is where I was going to start, and then make a few decisions about maybe there's some things in there that don't quite make a whole lot of don't work for this process, but by and large start there and then kind of organize from there. So I think we're on the same page. So that was good. And then Alder Foster mentioned something that I think I was also, thinking about this structure wise, I was thinking it would be nice to have to, for example, with Department of Transportation, that would be a video, but I think TE, Metro, and I'm blanking, could also have videos in the subcategory of Department of Transportation. I expect that this will come up with the Public Works group, and they may want to design something for their group as well as streets and so on and so forth. And I expect to have that conversation with them. So I just wanted to affirm that and hope that that's okay. That I'm on the right page. And then I did want to affirm what President Furman said, that if you continue down the list, we do have a number of videos that we shouldn't have. They should be able to keep in play for a number of years, and in terms of major initiatives, and they can go. There's overview and in depth, and oh, there was one other thing, but I'm blanking on it. Okay, I'm just gonna stop for there. But thank you. I hope we're on the same page here.
We'll see shortly, Karen. Thank you. Alder Hack, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to recognize something that Vice President Curry referenced, Muni Code, and would something like that fall under, I mean, a council office video? Here's where you can get tips on how to do that. Would we have one for council staff too?
Yeah, I think that, there's definitely, yes, there would definitely be council specific, like alder having nothing to do with the job, nothing to do with a specific department, but having to do with more broad stuff. Yes, the council office is working on that,
Okay.
and we'll absolutely have some more details about that in the near future. But I think right now, yeah, we're focused on giving agencies a guide so they can get moving on this. Alder Conklin, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I just really wanted to kind of back up what Alder Figueroa Cole was saying of how important it is to have the big organizational chart of, okay, we have streets, but do streets handle the like water main breaks, or do streets only handle recycling? Just having that more organizational chart of who actually runs what. The street lights, that goes to traffic engineering. You know what I'm saying? And those are things that you would think would go to the streets department and things like that. So I think there needs to be a clearer understanding of that. Two, I think let's not try to rush this, because that's the problem. We rush everything and then it's not done correctly. Like, new alders aren't coming on until April. Like, if they're going to make a 10-minute video, I don't think they need 4 months to figure out how to make a 10-minute video. I would prefer that we do this correctly, the right way, the first time. That would be much appreciated. And lastly, the thing that I wanted to bring up is, lastly, I just wanted to say too, like, I think there not only needs to be training in the City of Madison website, but we need to have more in-depth training with Legistar and how that works, and how a person gets comfortable with that, because I'm still kind of scared of Legistar and I don't really know how to find things in there. So I think Legistar and the City of Madison website should be a training for people coming into this job to be comfortable and knowledgeable to share that information on their blogs and things like that. So those are my pennies for your thoughts.
Thank you, Alder Conklin. I think one of the things we're hearing very clearly here tonight, which is something that we're really trying to account for, is that everybody processes and learns information in different ways. And there is no right or wrong way of doing it. What that is how we have tried to put together this guide. If you scroll down to the page 3, there's very clearly on there Alder constituent FAQs, most common issues alders will contact your agency about. We're happy to get more suggestions, but I think agencies have a pretty good idea what alders are contacting them about. The idea there is, with all of these videos, is there is no longer going to be one single video or one single thing to look at where you're going to learn everything, because we can't have people sit through a 4-hour presentation about a particular department and expect alders to comprehend that when they're watching 4-hour videos for 32 different departments, and they're learning about stuff that they just don't need to know at that particular moment. And so I recognize and appreciate that there are some alders that may not be interested in seeing Tom Lynch say hello, and you can see what Yang looks like, and you can see what Justin looks like, and hear them talk briefly. Fine, there are going to be alders that look at that and say, fine, I'm never going to watch that, and don't watch that. But I'm hoping that this guide checks all the boxes as much as possible for alders to say, you know what, I do now. I am interested now in the water utility, and I want to go watch what their major initiatives are because somebody just mailed me about PFAS, and I realized I know nothing about that. And they go, because it never came up and it wasn't important. And oh my goodness, now I know more about that. Now I know why it's important because I watched that video that they put together on that. This is really intended not to overwhelm people when, frankly, we have an incredibly overwhelming and complicated system. So I just wanted people to keep that in mind as we're going through it. I'm not sure we're going to get through this whole guide today, too, because if we're going to spend this much time in each of the sections, we're not going to have enough time. But I do think this is going to talking to agencies, this is going to take a tremendous amount of work, not just for them to do 5-minute video. We're asking them probably to put together I don't know what the total number is, but even just looking at the categories, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different videos that will end up, some of them will spawn other videos because you'll have a major initiative about maybe it's affordable housing, then you have another major initiative about homeless services or whatever it is. So this will be a tremendous amount of work. So I don't think springing it on staff in March is necessarily a good idea because they're going to have to put this together. And I do think our plan, which we didn't really talk about much, is we want to give this content to alders when it's to candidates when it's ready. There is no reason not to give a candidate more information about individual departments so they could learn more about the city while they're campaigning, so they're not learning about it all at one point. So we could talk more about that in the future, but we are going to start giving new candidates heads up on here are some things to make the onboarding a little bit better of a process, so you're not as overwhelmed on day one. Alder Foster, go ahead.
Thank you. I think at some point it might be helpful for all of us too to just get a better sense of where this fits in the kind of broader orientation with some of those other things that have been brought up a few times, the Legistar, Municode, et cetera. I mean, they could be covered in the sort of council office section, but I think what I'm hearing and what resonates with me is that I think some of the most critical parts around orientation, maybe the focus that we've had historically on agency presentations and the amount of time that's taken up. I mean, I think there's already acknowledgement that that's maybe been too long, but maybe even still we should push to skinny that part up in terms of an orientation, because I still really feel like any of the topic-based stuff, alders are going to dig into it as they're ready to dig into it, as it comes up for them, as they have interests, and that's, I think, in the I think we could be less prescriptive about having orientation style videos available for all of those topics from the get-go, and really focus more on that high level introduction. So here's the org chart kind of thing, which I've heard a lot of people reinforce. That's important and valuable. Get better clarity on what are the services that actually happen there, so I remember who to contact when something comes up. And then what are, here are the most common things that as alder, you're going to have, relationships with us. It's because people are going to ask you about garbage pickup. They're going to ask you that's streets, and here's the best way to help with that. To me, it feels like focusing a little bit more on almost like a 15 or 20 minute, just one video. And I like the idea of 5-minute snippets, but also for me, at least, it would start to feel overwhelming if every agency, and I don't know if we end up with 20 of them or what the number is, but if we've got 5 videos times 20 and there's 100 videos, even if they're only 5 to 10 to 15 minutes each, I'm personally not going through them all as part of orientation. So I guess I would just overall lean towards the kind of highest level appropriate overview of here's the stuff, with an invitation to reach out. And then over time, I think we could add in initiative specific things, as they create them. But I also am a little bit wary of, asking DOT to create a video around complete and green streets, partly because it's like very dynamic. And the reality is it's going to, whatever version is in the works, the best place to do that is for alders to watch the committee meetings on it, which are, usually recorded. So I guess I'm not as convinced around, even something like PFAS. I think maybe we should have a 5-minute overview of PFAS for the general community, for alders, for everybody. I don't know if having that situated in okay, you're now an alder, here's your list of all of the general things to learn. I'm worried that that gets a little overwhelming and that a lot of alders don't end up watching all of those anyway. So overall suggestion is keep it tight, keep it short, maybe even consider just one short-ish, 20-minute or so video per agency, really hitting on the key stuff with an invitation for help and support for alders.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Alder Heck.
Thanks. I tend to agree somewhat with what Alder Foster just had to say, especially in introductions and higher level things, that it could get really overwhelming quickly. But I think it's just fine to have super detailed things as people drill down, and it may be that they don't watch that one video until 6 months later when they have the need to. But so I think we can use both approaches. I did have one category of topic that I was hesitant about, and that was the budget topic. And I'm kind of jumping ahead. I feel like, for instance, agency capital budget, operating budget, and things like that will be sometimes utilized as lobbying opportunities for agencies. They will want to change them constantly because those are super complicated considerations that, yes, new alders need to ramp up on understanding the budget within, 6 months of being an alder. But I guess I'm a little hesitant to use those in orientation materials, but maybe I answered that question in my first remarks, that somebody doesn't look at that until 6 months later. But I feel like the budget part of it really needs to be not about anticipated large upcoming budget issues in a particular department. I'm just thinking that's going to be people asking for what they want in their budget. I don't know. And that seems not very helpful. I don't have a solution for that. I'm sort of just thinking out loud. That's it.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Foster, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was reinforced some of what I was thinking. I think the budget's a good example. And I think there's still good potential for agencies to use videos to share things out. I'm just not convinced that they're necessarily part of or need to be part of orientation. So I think the budget is a good example of that. Theoretically, every year they're going to have, here's our initiatives, here's what's in the SIP, whatever. I mean, the place that they do that normally is in the budget hearings at finance, right? When they're doing the agency presentations. And so those could also be then maybe recorded and linked back for alders or something, but it doesn't really make sense to me that it's an orientation task, because it's really just part of the budget work every year. So from an orientation perspective, to me, it would be more from finance, here's how budget works, or maybe there's a whole one just on, kind of the budget process more generally. But I guess I agree with what I think I'm hearing from Alder Heck is putting those in there. I don't think we have to smash it all into one thing. Even something like TIF, when maybe is more static, I think you could have, if they want to do a recording, a video that goes through and does it, go ahead. But I don't think that needs to be considered part of broad general alder orientation, personally.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa call.
So I'm going to stick with the budget. And again, this is from my own personal experience on this regard. I get that we are all going to have to sit there and listen to Dave's landscape of the budget. That's the second year in a row that I have to do that. But this was my first year doing budget amendments on my own, and I actually had to write down the process. So that doesn't change. How do you create an amendment that you need? Do you need a sponsor? You don't need a sponsor, things like that. I think, and for me, actually, the first year, the key thing for me was understanding the actual budget book from the prior year. Sitting down and I don't need to have a total detail on that, but just a quick overview of how that works. I mean, and I'm not saying that is something that we need right now in April or whatever, but it would be very helpful to have the budget process, not the budget that we're talking about, but the budget process, because that didn't change at all. Last year we learned about that list that rolls over.
Alder, I want to be clear. I mean, we're talking about agency onboarding videos. I know we've gotten off to other things. Alder Heck was very specifically talking about, and Alder Foster very specifically talking about whether or not agencies should go into detail on what structures of their budget. I hear you on the budget stuff. We could talk more about how we can orient the people to the budget, but I assure you, that's some of the confusion that we're having here tonight as well. Nobody is watching all of these videos in April. That's just not happening. There's no scenario. Right, but that's what I'm also saying. So, the idea that we're going to put together, that anybody's going to watch how to do a budget amendment in April, they're not going to do that. But I do think there is a ton of value, and especially the repeat thing. I don't want to sit through finance meetings, and obviously I won't have to sit through another budget finance meeting. But it's not fun sitting through a budget finance meeting, re-educating people on the same thing, because we have new alders, every 2 years on how to do X and how to do Y. We did that again this year, and I understand why we did, because it's a really complicated process. But yes, we will absolutely talk to budget team and figure out, how to put together some of those better guides and have them send it out and be better about it, because the process doesn't change from year to year, but it is confusing. It is hard to understand, and I think there's value in having some templates and stuff here. So I hear you loud and clear. I think you'd be a great source for somebody to talk to on how some of that works, based on some of how you've figured that stuff out, and we'll definitely talk more about that. But I do want to focus on the Alder onboarding video content guide. I will say, I don't think we're going to go through each of the categories at this point. I don't think we're going to get consensus tonight either on how this looks like, clearly. I mean, I think some people think, it needs to be as basic as possible. Others understand that, there are departments people want to dive into, and there are other departments that people probably don't want to dive into until they have to. The goal here is to give alders a content library that they can look at their leisure when they need to. We absolutely recognize that just when you get the job in April, there are things you need to know to do the job. And we're going to be much more focused in this orientation on how to do the job on day one, and then give people the room and the ability to learn things at their own pace. And so that's really been the focus here. I get it. There are people, I actually don't like watching videos. So I as a new alder, I may not watch all these videos, but I think other alders certainly should. Everybody learns things differently. I think there's a lot of value in this. If people want things to be different, certainly, we could talk about that a little bit more tonight, and there's an ability to give us more feedback, but I think there needs to be some sort of consistency. We can't have an approach where every department is just deciding, I'm going to tell people this little section, or I'm going to do it this way, and somebody does it that way. We're really trying to achieve some sort of consistency for people to have information over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not disagreeing. All I'm saying is that there are going to be departments, I'm actually agreeing with you guys. There are going to be departments like the TIF, like the budget, that are going to take more snips of information, and they don't need to be available on the first day. I mean, I'm saying the same thing. So, but in general, again, the videos and the information, in my opinion, should be focused on processes that don't change, and center on how can these processes help my constituents. That's really what I feel in general. So I'm not disagreeing. All I'm saying is that we will have to make exceptions from some areas where we will need quite a library to break down those complex issues.
I appreciate that. I do think we're close to on the same page. So thank you. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is amenable, but I think even if we can get guidance on, and maybe this isn't possible today, but even if perhaps on whether we should be prioritizing some of these video, do we do we go the Alder Foster route or something similar where we prioritize some of them and tell the agencies to push out the overviews first, and then we work then you all have some time to think about how you want to handle the in-depth issues. I guess it's just a plea for something so that we can. Yeah, I think you understand. Just some direction that we can then follow, because unfortunately it feels like a long time, but I think it's not a really long time, especially if depending on what we're asking them to do.
Yeah, I think the bigger question I'd like to hear from people tonight is, I get it. They're each individual alder. It sounds like you may not consume some of this content. And that's fine. That's who, as I said, everybody learns things different ways. If there are specific things that you are not seeing listed in this guide that you think we're leaving out, we could talk about that here tonight. You can sleep on it, mail Karen and I will come back with more of a presentation on some of those nuts and bolts stuff about that the council office will do. Everything from, Legistar to, where do I park in the garage, or whatever all the different issues are that we're thinking about. The council office has been working on that for quite some time at this point, and they're trying to put that together. We'll come back and talk about that more, but I really, more than anything, I think my focus with us for the rest of this discussion this evening was, if you see something missing, let's talk about it now. And if and you can certainly mail us too, but I don't think we're going to come to consensus on whether or not we need to do these videos. And I think, quite frankly, more information, the better. I do think one of the things I'm hearing is, how do we get people to understand what they're actually about to watch? People aren't going to just click on videos without knowing what the video is. So I think maybe making sure that we have the slide deck available before somebody watches a video, so they could scan through the slide deck and go, oh, you know what? I actually do want to hear them talk about that, because that just came up and now I need to learn more about it. But I think, we need to get away from these three-hour orientations that we've had, one after another, night after night. And that's what we're really trying to focus on, is being able to provide people with something that they can look at over time. I don't really care what complete green streets are until I care what that is. And so, it could be literally, I don't have a problem with an agency going, you know what, in the 25th minute of the Transportation Policy Planning Board on October 30th, they went into detail on that. That's great. But what I don't want to have happen is to tell an alder, you have to go watch these 4 different videos to understand where it came from, what it is now, what the different iterations are of it. But I do think there's a ton of value in having a content library available for alders, new alders and existing. Alder Foster, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. I think one thing that's getting more clear for me is, and I think the content library is something I also support. I think I'm just now understanding them more clearly as two different things that could be even housed in the same internet page or whatever. But when I think of like Alder onboarding, it's also this like, oh, what should I be trying to get through in my first few weeks or month? What is that early stuff? That's to me more the onboarding stuff. And so I do think that's I guess why I was advocating for the higher level agency overview. Here's this, I would suggest it's that first row introductions. I think the major initiatives strategic plan overview is sort of an obvious sort of next part that's reinforcing, here's the stuff we work on. And then in my mind, it's like skipping to that last one of the Alder constituent FAQs. Here are the key contact points. And then maybe the other like agency budget overview and major initiatives in depth. Those are, in my mind, then are better sort of suited for that content library. They get updated not on any set schedule, but as you get a new initiative, as you're ready to. I think there's a lot of value in that. In my mind, I think it also makes it easier maybe, and in terms of an ask ahead of April, if for right now, the agencies just can focus on, give us one, 20-minute, 25-minute, that includes introduction of key staff, where you fit, what the org chart is, what the big issues are, and why I should care as Alder. That to me feels meaningful and useful for all new alders to be able to click through and at least then still have 20 of them, but they can go through and get that high level overview. And then over time, I think we can communicate with agencies. We'd like you to be thinking, we are going to be creating a content library. We're accepting your submissions, and I think we could both have topics that we ask for specifically on behalf of, we know that these are topics that alders need to know about, want to know about, so we could, we can request those, but then also encourage agencies to do it on items that they want to share out. So I guess, just clarifying that, and maybe that also gives a little bit of reprieve on the timeline for just this initial April, is get them all to do that intro kind of video, and then continue working on building out the content library down the road.
Yeah, thank you. I think the big thing that definitely has come out is the idea that dumping a lot of small books on somebody doesn't make it any easier than dumping a bunch of large books. And so I think we need to probably be providing a little bit more of a guided path, opposed to just saying, here's a content library, review it at your own leisure, and make it more clear of like, I don't think anybody joins this job and doesn't want to know everything on day one. And you don't need to know everything on day one. I'm 4 years plus and I don't know everything still. So that's very, very helpful. So thank you. Alder Figueroa Cole, go ahead.
So then for me, day one, then, I mean, that I hear what Grant is saying, but day one, for example, I look at the paperwork that you guys presented there, the agenda, how to read the agenda. Like what is, like Robert Rules is not going to be a 5-minute video, but it's something that no matter how much you explain that to me, it doesn't stick until you are, doing it. And the mayor does a very good job guiding us through the first few meetings. But how to read the agenda? What is the consent agenda? What does the meeting item for introduction? What are the recommendations that
Alder, I'm gonna let you know we're actually I apologize for not telling everybody this. We're actually going to invite new alders to do a mock meeting where we're going to have a mock agenda and we're going to do all of this. And so that's actually a date we're going to send out and let people know, put it in your calendar, because I think that was the problem. Telling you what Robert's rules is and telling you how to do that, if you're not actually doing it, and then we ask people to do it for the first time in a live meeting where they're making real decisions, we're very focused on doing a mock meeting, and would love people's feedback on that. But I think getting alders in a room and saying, okay, here's a pretend meeting. We did that for the hybrid stuff, so we already have a little bit of a script.
So I feel like we need to separate the agenda from that process. I mean, reading 40, 60, sometimes pages of agenda items, like how to navigate those waters before you get to a meeting. When you get an agenda on Friday afternoon and you have until Tuesday to go through it, like how do you navigate that? It takes practice also, but there's pointers that we can provide new alders so they're not overwhelmed. So I get what you're saying, and that's great, but I think the agenda should also be its own topic. There's a lot of information there.
Thank you. Yeah. Alder Heck, go ahead.
Thanks. I was going to say I agreed with what Alder Foster had to say about a somewhat longer introductory video, but still, I think I'd cap it at 15 minutes for each agency, and then also available in the beginning, I think would be the start of an FAQ document for agencies. Like, what are the questions that alders ask the most, that whole thing. And that, I don't know whether that's content library or it might be, maybe every agency has one of those, but that to me could be something that agencies could put together pretty easily, and it could be a living document. They could add to it later, but I like that concept of a little bit longer opening video and then filling out the content library as we go.
Thank you, Alder Heck. I think this has been a good discussion. Appreciate the feedback. I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think we're all pretty close to being on the same page, understanding that the process needs to be better, and it's also going to be a dynamic process. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to affirm for everyone to allay any concerns that the council office is actively working on a couple of different packages of things that we will be dealing with, and I'm going to put the attorney's office here. I'm going to rope them right in because some of those topics are also them. So it's on my work plan here in the next couple weeks to reach out to them as well. So I hear you loud and clear, and you are absolutely right. And we'll be back with more from that we can control. Do you know what I mean? That we can take care of, and we don't have to worry about communicating out to numbers of agencies. Do I hear consensus on a video, or do I not hear consensus on a video for the agencies?
We're going to get a video on agencies. Karen, I'll follow up with you more.
Wonderful.
We'll talk more about next steps here and how to come back and talk to CCEC about what the plan is. But you know, I think the feedback here is pretty clear that if we just do this and dump it on a page, that nobody will ever look at any of it, and that we need to be much more intentional about how we're going to give this to the new alders. I don't think anybody disagrees with the intent, the content necessarily, but I think there are very understandable, strong concerns about how we're actually going to present it to new alders, because all of this is so incredibly overwhelming. And you know, we want to do what we can to make it that less so. So I think there's good feedback here tonight, and I think we'll get this together, and we'll come back very soon and talk more about some of those other pieces and get some additional feedback from everybody. So again, I appreciate the discussion tonight. Thank you. Let's see how we can focus on the council office update, and then very briefly talk about our future agenda items. So Karen, do you want to talk about the council office update at all, or do you
there was one material. That last minute material. Can I tell them a little bit about it?
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, that was really intense. And so I appreciate that so much. And we added something to discuss, which is, let me share my screen. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities created some courses. I had some meetings with them, and they are willing to offer them to us and offer them to us at no charge. And they speak to the question of generally aldering, right? And I think, and President Furman can speak to it. I believe, sort of the question for you all is, do you think these would be valuable? Is it something you'd be willing to let us pilot in April and see if they were something we would want to continue with? So.
Alder Foster, go ahead.
I guess maybe I missed this, or maybe it wasn't on the thing, but I haven't reviewed it in detail, but just looking at the first, stay in your lane one, or I guess it's navigating your lane, but it makes me honestly, it makes me really nervous, because I think there's a really important question around what is policy and what is implementation. And so I don't know who created it. I don't know what the content of it is. So I would have a hard time signing. I know it's League of Wisconsin Municipalities, but I don't know. I guess I would be cautious about something that's pretending to give kind of advice about what the appropriate role of elected officials are versus staff, because I think it's a really nuanced topic that people might have really different opinions on. So without seeing it, I wouldn't endorse it as my opinion right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of my concerns too is, frankly, would be that we're going to be overwhelming new alders with so many other things, and I think I appreciate the feedback about the navigating your lane thing, because that is always a struggle on who gets to decide what that lane is, and frankly, I'm not sure each. Anyway. But I think as we're looking at the guides, as we're looking at what we're doing internally to address some of the things that they're trying to cover, we can see whether or not it makes sense. I think we're going to struggle to get people to do just our stuff, and getting them to do additional outside third-party stuff is going to be hard. And as we talk about some of the other trainings, whether it's the active shooter training and if we're doing de-escalation stuff again, I mean, man, we are telling people that are thrown into this role, here is so much you have to do. Now, the problem is they should do all of that, but whether or not they're actually going to make time for it is going to be the issue. So, Karen, I'll work with you a little bit more on how we could best possibly respond to them. But I am a little bit concerned with what we're asking of people.
I just want to say one thing about this is one topic that I feel like we haven't covered in a lot of other. I have plans in my head and so on. And this topic, the constituent relations, is one that I feel like we haven't really addressed and I know there is some interest in discussing and, and having that conversation about how do you interact with constituents. So I'm not sure if I could get a read on this one particular. I hear what you're saying about the other one. Does anyone have strong feelings about this topic, out of curiosity?
Alder Foster, go ahead.
I'll just repeat that without sort of having gone through it. It's hard to say just off the bullet points, but I mean, I think it is a worthwhile discussion topic. I don't think including it as part of a mandatory orientation training is a great idea. I think we really need to be, I know we keep saying it, but I think we need to, in action, also really, really keep it down to the essentials. I think this is maybe probably better for somebody who has a particular interest in having an hour-long training on it, rather than requiring it across the board, is my instinct. And also, I kind of wonder how applicable this would be in a sort of generalized sense, as opposed to what's it like being an alder in Madison. Because I think things around expectations and, I think my hunch is that it might be most useful to have this kind of conversation with your mentor if you're a new alder, or talk with other alders about it might be even more valuable than getting a kind of generic presentation on it. But it might be really interesting, but I think say the same thing of don't go towards requiring it.
Alder Heck.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. I look at this, and for me, I realize this is just me. It's like, well, that's all common sense. But it's, I think coming out of campaigning as a new alder, you probably also have a pretty good idea of how to answer and address some of these, hopefully. But I also recognize that, as we keep saying, folks learn in different ways, and it might be helpful for somebody to do this if they want to. But I agree, I wouldn't want to require it. That's it.
One of the helpful things about being elected is you also then believe you know the right way to do everything. You know everything already. So I'm not sure how many people are going to sign up. But thank you, Alder Heck. Appreciate your feedback. We will figure out if this is something that's worth optionally offering, and see if we can get a little bit more detail. Karen, do you want to give a brief update on the council office?
Yeah, and thank you. That was very, very helpful. I really appreciate that feedback. Okay, so Chief of Staff update. I will share this with you all. We've had a long night, so you can let me know if you want more information about any of these topics. You received an email from Liz about your expense accounts. We had the information session with Attorney Haas. Liz is working on just a brief summary for the folks who weren't able to make it or who want a reminder. We're having an ongoing experience with the spots, the parking spots in the city county building garage. So we're taking some efforts. So you may notice some things down there. And so I wanted to give you a heads up on that. And you may have noticed things are getting updated in the ordinances, and we were contacted to update language on our website. And some of that language, of course, was in blogs, which we're not going to retroactively update that, but wanted to call your attention to that, give you some links, and ask when you're doing your blogs and so on to consult the style guide on gender inclusive language. Then I wanted to provide a couple of just real brief to let you know that things are happening. So I had already mentioned that I'm meeting with the administrative services team next week, and Larissa is working on the pilot for the social media accounts that that you all had discussed previously. And so she'll be able to come back with information about a pilot rollout and evaluation soon. She's also working on something that will probably come out sooner, which is some best practices. And she's working with Alder Heck as well on this, some best practices for folks who have individually rolled out social media as alders, and how to make some distinctions in terms of campaign accounts and alder business and so on and so forth to help you all manage that side of things. And then I just wanted to let you know that Katie is working on finalizing the framework for the intern program, so that we're hoping to have something. We'll bring something up for review here, but it's based on the work that the interns did last summer and we had talked about previously. But I just wanted to let you know that those things were in the works. Happy to answer any questions about that or anything else.
Alder Ferrero, call, go ahead.
Karen, what's going on in the parking area? I'm sorry, I didn't have time to read your report.
Yes. So I don't know if you've had a chance to attempt to fight for a spot down there, but we are finding on a regular basis that there are all kinds of random cars parked in our spots. And it's making it really difficult for anybody who wants to do business during the day, especially to park down there. I mean, the alders. And so and Dane County Facilities controls the parking garage. So it's a little harder we don't have, we're attempting out, we're going to put up some signs. And if we have to, we're going to put out some cones, and we'll see if that makes a dent in our attempts to clear those spots. That people seem to respect the county spots in my experience. So we're just hoping to kind of work on those little spots. But in the meantime, you have the Wilson Street garage. So if anybody who hasn't gotten a pass yet wants a pass, just let Liz know and she'll apply for you. That's free of charge. And then you can park in any of the public spots in the Wilson Street garage. But I know that it's nice. We have those spots. It would be nice to be able to use them. So we're attempting to get a handle on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, move on to our last agenda item, which is future meetings. We have a meeting on the 13th. We will hopefully the two things that I'm hoping we can talk about there, and I will cancel the meeting if they're not ready, is see if I can give you guys an update on some BCC reorganization and administrative support team stuff. And then also see if we have any updates on orientation that are worth talking about. If people have any particular topics that they'd like to see us be talking about at that meeting or any of the future meetings next year, speak now or send me an email. And if nobody has anything, I would entertain a motion.
Move adjournment.
Can I get a second? There's no Nikki. She actually used two fingers, so she got that over JL. There was no objection. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.